They say betrayal doesn't announce itself, but whoever coined that phrase clearly never attended the Aurora Winter Gala. It was my night, the culmination of 16 years building something out of nothing, of turning kitchen sink formulas and late-night emails into a global skincare empire. The ballroom at the Metropolitan Club gleamed under crystal chandeliers, gold-etched invitations in every manicured hand. My new product line, Noir Vérité, was moments away from unveiling, and Forbes had just named me one of the top 10 self-made women in luxury wellness. I should have been floating, but something in the air had teeth. My assistant, Rowan, had intercepted a murmured conversation near the coat check earlier. Whispers, flash of a camera, something about the new girlfriend. I brushed it off. Thomas would never humiliate me like that. Not in public, not tonight. I wore a black velvet gown custom-made in Paris. Simple, sculptural, power in the shape of fabric. My heels clicked against marble as I crossed the room, offering tight smiles to executives and editors, each congratulating me on the feature. An icon, one had said. You redefined beauty without chasing youth. How ironic, in retrospect. The flashbulbs erupted by the grand staircase just as I was about to step into the spotlight for my welcome speech. I turned, instinctively camera-trained by now, but the cameras weren't for me. They were for her. Tall, lithe, draped in a champagne-colored slip dress that shimmered under the lights. Barely 26, if that. Platinum blonde hair twisted into a careless knot. The kind of effortless glamour that required 5 professionals and a trust fund. She clung to Thomas's arm with the entitlement of someone who believed she belonged. I felt the breath leave my lungs before I registered the laughter. "Helena!" Thomas's voice boomed across the ballroom. He looked fresh, tanned, his smile too wide, his confidence too casual. The same man who'd once begged me for help writing his pitch decks, who'd cried on my shoulder after his 3rd agency layoff, who used to say I made him feel like he could be someone. And now, he was here, in my gala, with her. "This is Savannah," he said, his hand slipping down to the small of her back with the intimacy of ownership. We've been meaning to tell you. Tell me, as in, together." Savannah tilted her head and extended a hand, her red nails gleaming like lacquered daggers. "It's such an honor, Helena. I'm a huge fan of your brand, especially the wrinkle serum." She giggled. Wrinkle serum. The room around me blurred. Guests frozen mid-cocktail, my board chair stiffening behind his flute of brute. A young social media intern from Vogue visibly gasped, then pulled out her phone. I looked down at Savannah's hand but didn't take it. "You're wearing my color," I said quietly, eyes locking with hers. "How bold." She smiled wider. "It's his favorite." Thomas winced, briefly, then caught himself. "I didn't mean for this to be awkward," he said, adjusting his tuxedo collar like a man preparing for a toast. "We just didn't want secrets. And since we'll be moving forward," he paused, then said it, "together." Somewhere behind me, the sound team queued up my walk-on music. My cue to take the stage, to pitch the new line, to perform the vision of serenity and grace I'd curated for years. Instead, I looked at Thomas and said, "You always did struggle with timing." Then I turned, stepped onto the stage, and faced a sea of frozen faces and raised eyebrows. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady despite the tectonic shift under my ribs. Aurora was born from moments just like this, sharp, unexpected and defining, a beat of silence. Then, tonight we celebrate truth, and the truth is, we glow brightest after the burn. The applause came slowly, then crescendoed, some out of sympathy, others admiration, and a few, I knew, purely for the spectacle. I held their gaze for another heartbeat, before stepping off the stage and heading for the bar. I ordered a neat whiskey, no garnish. Thomas and Savannah didn't approach me again that night. They didn't have to. The damage was precise, public, and designed to provoke a reaction. But I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I stayed until the end, made small talk with investors, posed for a final photo with the team. I smiled, and then I went home, alone, to the penthouse I paid for, the company I built, and the bed that had just become mine again. I sat in the dark living room, city lights flickering against glass, my gown puddled around me like a fallen crown. That's when I made the decision. Not to mourn, not to survive, but to strategize. Because if they thought public humiliation was my breaking point, they'd forgotten one thing. I invented the glow-up. I woke the next morning in full makeup, sprawled across Egyptian cotton sheets that felt more like irony than luxury. The lipstick stain on my pillow was not just any shade. It was bloodline, the same deep crimson tone I'd designed for our Winter 22 campaign. A color meant to convey boldness, command, and unapologetic presence. Now it marked the outline of my exhaustion. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Rowan, always punctual. 7:06 a.m. Damage control in progress. Vogue and Harper's calling for statements. Savannah's IG story hit 2 million views overnight. I've drafted a neutral response. Need your sign-off. I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed coffee. And clarity. In that order. Downstairs, the espresso machine sputtered to life as I stood barefoot in the kitchen I'd designed down to the brass cabinet pulls. Savannah had been here before, I realized. I'd seen the filtered glow of my marble countertops in her Instagram stories weeks ago, back when Thomas insisted he needed space to clear his head at the lake house. I hadn't known then what that really meant, but I do now. The house was full of ghosts. A toothbrush I hadn't touched, but which somehow never ran out of paste. A wine glass always mysteriously in the sink. The scent of jasmine that wasn't mine. How long had she been here? How long had they been laughing at me behind perfectly curated filters? I sat on the kitchen stool, sipping espresso like a ritual of control, and opened the folder I'd kept hidden for years, the one labeled contingency. Inside, documents, passwords, the prenup I'd insisted on but never read line by line, because love, I thought, was a better guarantee. I was wrong. 12 years ago, Thomas had shown up to our shared walk-up with nothing but ambition and an idea for a boutique branding agency. I'd paid for the website, the initial pitch decks, the networking dinners that were little more than therapy sessions with whiskey. He'd had charm and hunger, and I'd had the capital. Together, we'd convinced clients to buy into the story. I just never thought he'd sell it without me. The prenup was airtight, but only if I played it right. Clause 14b. Any behavior deemed publicly defamatory by either party must be substantiated to avoid invoking financial penalties. In other words, if I went nuclear, if I let rage win, I'd pay for it, which meant I had to smile, strategize, bleed elegantly. I spent the rest of the morning reading. Every post Savannah had made in the last 6 months, every caption, every location tag. I compiled screenshots in a new folder, Savannah Phase 1. I wasn't sure yet what Phase 2 would look like, but I knew the war had already started. At 11:00 a.m. sharp, my PR director called. "Helena, love, how do you want to play this?" His voice was tight, calculated. "We can say nothing and let the storm pass, or we release a statement about focusing on the brand." I thought of Savannah's face, gleaming with youth and oblivion, and of Thomas's eyes scanning the room for admiration. They'd expected me to disappear, to crumble, to fade into the role of the bitter ex. "No statement," I said. "Let them guess." Silence on the other end. Then, understood. By afternoon, the buzz had shifted. Comments beneath Aurora's posts split down the middle. Some defended me. Others called Savannah an upgrade. A few suggested that I was too focused on my work to be a good wife, that I had driven Thomas away. I closed the app. I knew better than to drink poison and expect it to nourish me. Instead, I called the person I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. My attorney, Mei Lin. "Helena Morais," she said, voice low and amused. "Is the world ending?" "Worse," I replied. "I'm going to file for divorce." There was a pause. "I'll be in your office by 5. "Mwana." And the office smelled like bergamot and quiet power when she arrived. Dressed in charcoal gray, her heels echoing authority on the marble. May didn't bother with small talk. "I've already pulled the marriage contract," she said, setting her bag down. "You're covered, but he's going to test boundaries, especially if she's coaching him." "She's younger," I said flatly. "Not necessarily smarter." May smirked. "Never underestimate a woman with a ring light and a podcast." We reviewed everything. Joint assets, properties, overlapping investments. His name wasn't on Aurora by design. I'd made sure of that when we incorporated. But the Manhattan penthouse was trickier. Technically joint-owned, even if I paid every dime. "He's going to want something," May said. "Men like Thomas don't walk away without trying to turn victimhood into currency." "Let him try," I murmured. When May left, the sun had dipped low, painting the skyline in ash and fire. I walked to the bar cart in the corner, poured a measure of Glenfiddich, and stared at my reflection in the glass. Wrinkle serum. Savannah's words echoed in my head, meant as a jab, but all I heard was projection. That kind of woman doesn't age well, not because of time, but because of emptiness. She'll turn 30 and realize there's nothing left to say. I, on the other hand, was just getting started. Savannah Ray, 26, Sagittarius, 1.2 million Instagram followers, 300,000 TikTok fans, a podcast titled Vibrate Higher, babe that ranked in the low 200s on wellness charts. She was everything the algorithm loved: filtered vulnerability, curated chaos, and a daily diet of affirmations printed over oat milk lattes. I spent that Sunday afternoon doing what I once paid teams of junior brand analysts to do: deep dive digital reconnaissance. With 3 screens open in my home office and a notebook labeled Op Strategy, S+T, I studied her life like an acquisition target. At 1:34 p.m., I pressed play on her most recent YouTube vlog, manifesting my dream apartment in Midtown. My apartment. The one with the smoked glass backsplash I had imported from Milan. The same kitchen counters where I'd made Thomas his favorite mushroom risotto during the lockdown. Now she stood barefoot in front of the Sub-Zero fridge, wearing his oversized shirt, claiming, "The energy here is just so aligned with our future." I paused the video. Rewound. Sure enough, she referred to our future 5 times in 12 minutes. She showed the terrace I'd designed with reclaimed teak, saying she'd turn it into a meditation lounge. She called the master suite her sanctuary. She never once said my name. I had been erased, rebranded. The comments, mostly from younger women, were full of praise. "You're glowing, girl. So proud of you for calling in this next chapter. He finally found someone who gets him." I should have been furious. And I was. But beneath the rage, there was something colder, more useful: clarity. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a calculated repositioning. Thomas and Savannah weren't hiding. They were performing, crafting a narrative that cast me as the cold, distant workaholic who couldn't give him what he needed. She, on the other hand, was the warm, present, nurturing muse, the Instagrammable upgrade. But what Savannah didn't know, what Thomas forgot, is that I invented brand perception. My first agency gig was cleaning up a lingerie line's image after a tabloid scandal. I once made a bankrupt soap company relevant again, with a rebrand and a 6-figure retargeting strategy. They were underestimating me. I made a list. 1. Control the optics. Say nothing. Silence creates mystique. Let their overexposure work against them. 2. Build a timeline. Cross-reference. Savannah's posts with Thomas's business trips. 3. Find leverage. Receipts, contracts, correspondence. Every lie leaves a trail. At 3:45 p.m., I called Rowan. "Activate media freeze," I said. "No press quotes, no event appearances. I'm going dark." "Copy that," he replied. "But Helena, there's something else." A pause. He lowered his voice. "Savannah's scheduled for a panel next week. The Female Future Forum. She's been added last minute. Topic is feminine energy and business alignment." I blinked. "She's speaking about business," I said flatly. "Yes. And..." Rowan exhaled. "They listed her as co-founder of Aurora Wellness Collective." For a moment, I didn't move. Then I laughed. Once, sharply. Thomas had been feeding her fantasy, giving her talking points. The same man who once mocked social media as vanity in high resolution was now letting his girlfriend cosplay as my successor. "That's slander," I said. "It's also being amplified," Rowan replied. "Wellness influencers are reposting it. Some think she bought into the brand. Others think it's a partnership announcement. Of course they did. The digital attention economy didn't care about truth, just narrative velocity. Let them run with it," I said finally. "We'll correct them later. On our terms." "Helena," I said later. I hung up and reopened Savannah's TikTok. One of her pinned videos was an audio mashup over slow-motion footage of her twirling in my hallway. "You tried to bury me. Didn't know I was a seed." Caption: "Not everyone will support your glow-up. Leave them in the dust." 2 million views, 100,000 likes, comments flooded with applause emojis. What they didn't know, what she didn't know, is that real power doesn't live in hearts and shares. Real power signs paychecks. Real power hires attorneys with decade-long memories and a zero-tolerance policy for defamation. Real power doesn't scream. It strategizes. That evening, I pulled out a bottle of Veuve Clicquot I'd been saving since my first 8-figure year. I popped it alone. No toasts, no glasses raised. Instead, I sat on the balcony, barefoot in silk pants, and watched the skyline dissolve into glittering dark. Savannah wanted a war of optics, of crystals and captions. She'd get one, but it wouldn't be on her terms. She may have stolen the audience, but I owned the stage. The 3 days after the gala, I walked into my attorney's office with red lacquered nails, a camel coat draped over my shoulders, and 3 flash drives tucked neatly in my Hermes portfolio. The receptionist stood as I approached, as if recognizing not a client but a force. She offered coffee. I declined. Mei Lin ushered me into her conference room without pleasantries. She understood the gravity of the silence I carried. "I've reviewed the marriage agreement again," she began, unfolding a thick file. "The standard assets clause holds. What we need to monitor now is perception. They're building a story." I slid the flash drives across the polished table. "Let's build one better." She raised a brow. "What am I looking at? Location-tagged posts, transaction logs, timestamped security footage from the building, audio transcriptions, DMs from 3 former assistants of Savannah who were disenchanted." May smiled slowly. "You've been busy. I don't fight messy. I fight clean, with evidence." We worked through the documents like 2 surgeons, precise, methodical, emotionally detached. I watched as she reviewed each file, her pen marking margins with quiet aggression. The timeline was damning. Savannah had been in and out of my home 6 months before Thomas had the courage to say a word. The condo building's guest log alone painted a clear picture. Her name had appeared often, sometimes under aliases. One entry simply read, "Jules. Cute." The payments were worse. My personal credit card, used to purchase Savannah's Louboutin heels from Bergdorf's. Thomas had claimed it was a gift for a client's wife. Another charge for a private Reiki session at a Soho studio, and a hotel suite in Miami, billed during the same week Thomas said he was at a silent leadership retreat. My rage simmered, but I kept it caged. Rage is a liability. Strategy is currency. May took a breath. "We have grounds for breach and potential misappropriation. Can we prove intent? Intent is baked into repetition." She tapped the stack. "This is a pattern, not an accident." We shifted to asset review. My company was protected, fully under my name, structured through layered entities that insulated it from marital claims. Aurora's intellectual property, trademark filings, patents, all safe. But the Manhattan apartment was exposed. The deed had been romantic once. Both our names, a sign of unity, a future built together. Now it was a liability. "He's going to fight for it," May said. "It's leverage, not affection. He'll use it to negotiate. He thinks I care more about the apartment than the optics. And do you?" I paused. "No. I care about making sure he walks away with exactly what he deserves, which is nothing." We filed the initial paperwork that afternoon, quietly. No press, no public statements, just a signature, notarized and filed through the system like any other transaction. Efficient, unemotional. That night, I returned home to find the apartment subtly altered. A candle I never lit was burning. A playlist I hadn't created drifted from the sound system, soft piano and ambient whispers. I knew Savannah had been there. Her scent lingered, something floral and artificial, the kind of perfume that announces itself before entering a room. I stood in the foyer, listening to the illusion of calm, and imagined her touching my things, breathing in my life, believing it would become hers. In the bedroom, the top drawer of my nightstand was slightly ajar. Inside, a note, written on ivory cardstock in looping cursive. "We didn't mean to hurt you. Love always wins." I read it twice. Then I lit it on fire in the sink. And the next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Olivia Brandt, the youngest editor at Elle, sharp, ambitious, and quietly furious about how the industry treated aging women. We met years ago at a philanthropy event where I'd donated Aurora gift boxes, and she'd whispered, "Someday I'm going to write a takedown of youth worship." I reminded her of that conversation. "I want to talk," I said. "On record. About the architecture of reinvention." She caught on quickly. "Timing? Soon, but not yet. Let them build their illusion first." The second call was to my private banker. "Reassign all liquidity from joint holdings to the secure line under Aurora Reserve. Cancel all shared cards. Freeze the discretionary fund." "Understood. Do you want him notified?" "No. Let the first bounce alert him." And Thomas called that afternoon. I watched the screen flash with his name, as I sipped tea in my sunroom. Let it ring. The second call came 12 minutes later, then a third. Finally, a text. We need to talk. Savannah's being targeted. I know you're hurt, but this is cruel. Cruel. The word sat heavy in my chest. Not because it was true, but because it showed me exactly where his guilt lived. Not in what he did, but in how it made him look. I drafted a reply, then deleted it. Silence would speak louder. That night, Savannah posted a story. Her eyes rimmed with smudged mascara, voice quivering. Sometimes when women reclaim their voice, it threatens people who are used to controlling the narrative. She looked straight into the camera. I will not be silenced. The post exploded. Comments flooded in, pledging support, asking who hurt her. She never said my name, but she didn't have to. The algorithm knew. I watched from my quiet, dimly lit kitchen, hands steady on the stem of a wine glass. The world believed her, for now. But truth, like beauty, doesn't always reveal itself immediately. Sometimes it needs lighting, angles, patience. The final thing I did before bed was message Rowan. Prepare campaign assets. New tagline. Some things age, others evolve. The invitation arrived 3 days later, printed on textured ivory stock with embossed gold foil lettering, as if elegance could sanitize hypocrisy. Thomas Morais and Savannah Ray request the pleasure of your company for an evening of intention, intimacy, and alignment. The venue? A private rooftop in Soho. The dress code? Elevated minimalist. The purpose? Unclear, until I noticed the RSVP list. Executives, journalists, influencers, investors. It was a soft launch, not just of their relationship, but of her. A debut into the circles I built. A calculated introduction to the very people who once knew her as the plus one, and me as the main event, and they invited me. I almost didn't go. Then I thought about every woman who's ever had her life hijacked by someone who smiled through betrayal and called it self-actualization. I thought about the younger version of me who used to believe that silence was strength, that dignity meant walking away quietly while someone else rewrote the narrative. Not this time. I arrived 20 minutes late, deliberately. The rooftop glowed with curated intimacy, hanging Edison bulbs, low banquettes, and scented candles arranged with such precision it reeked of a rented personality. The skyline glittered in the background like an accessory. Savannah stood near the bar in a white silk jumpsuit that clung to her like armor. Thomas hovered beside her, performing attentive partnerhood, his hand on her lower back, his smile stretched taut. They didn't see me at first, but the crowd did. Conversations paused. Eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away, like rubberneckers passing a wreck they pretended not to notice. I walked slowly, deliberately, each step a reclaiming. Savannah turned. Her smile faltered for a half-second before she composed herself. "Helena," she said, her voice all air and effortlessness. "You look incredible." I wore black, sleek, severe, and commanding. No jewelry, just a pair of pointed stilettos sharp enough to wound. "Savannah," I replied, scanning the room behind her. "You redecorated." She laughed nervously. "Well, Thomas said it was time for a fresh perspective. New energy." I accepted the glass of champagne that a server offered me. Funny how men always crave newness when they've run out of substance. Thomas stepped forward, face tight. "Helena, we didn't expect—" "No," I interrupted, meeting his eyes. "You did. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been mailed." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Savannah jumped in. "We believe in healing, in transforming pain into something beautiful. Tonight is about celebrating that." I sipped the champagne slowly. "And monetizing it, apparently." Someone nearby snorted into their cocktail. Savannah flushed. For a moment, her influencer veneer cracked. Then she pivoted, smiling wide. "We're announcing a new project tonight," she said, voice a shade too loud. "Aligned Atelier, a space for empowered women to reclaim wellness. Thomas and I are co-founders." I felt the shift in the air. Guests turned toward us like plants toward light, hungry for spectacle. Savannah continued. "We believe that femininity isn't about age. It's about energy. And Helena's legacy, well, it inspired us. That was the play. Turn my success into their launch pad. Make my brand the mythology their wellness empire could rebel against." "How generous of you," I said. "I should have trademarked my influence." Thomas finally spoke. "This doesn't have to be combative." "No," I said. "It can be surgical." I turned, scanning the room. then raised my glass gently. To the repackaging of betrayal as growth, and to every woman who's ever been replaced, only to rise higher. The toast landed like a slap wrapped in velvet. Someone clapped, then another. Soon, the entire room applauded, not because they chose sides, but because they chose tension. Conflict was currency, and tonight, I was the bank. I set the empty flute down on a passing tray and walked away. A year later that night, as the last guests filtered out and the music softened, I stood near the edge of the rooftop and watched Savannah posing with a floral installation. Thomas adjusted her hair, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh with performative delight. I turned to leave. Helena. His voice stopped me. I didn't face him. Don't flatter yourself by calling this bravery. He stepped closer. I made a mistake. Now I turned. No, Thomas. You made a choice. Mistakes are accidental. This was strategic. And pathetic. I thought you didn't care anymore, he said quietly. I thought you'd moved on. Moved on? I laughed once, low and precise. Thomas, I outgrew you 5 years ago. I just hadn't realized it until now. He looked at me then, not as the woman he'd married or the CEO he once admired, but as the adversary he'd accidentally created. You're going to destroy us. I stepped closer, until the air between us felt charged with history. No, I said. You're going to destroy yourselves. I'm just going to stop saving you. At midnight, I sent a single text to May. Green light phase 2. Leverage drop begins Friday. The strategy was already in motion. A quiet campaign to reclaim narrative control, expose the falseness of their partnership, and remind the world that while youth fades, integrity endures. The next time they sipped champagne, it would be one I sent. Chilled, expensive, and engraved with a note. To alignment. You'll need it. There are wars fought with soldiers, and wars fought with lawyers. But the most lethal battles are fought with spreadsheets. The Monday after the rooftop event, I stepped into my office at Aurora's Madison Avenue headquarters, not as a woman scorned, but as a general preparing for her counteroffensive. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, framing the city in clean, cold light. Everything inside the space spoke of deliberate restraint. Pale oak, brushed steel, walls lined with minimalist artwork. Power doesn't need noise. It needs structure. I stood at the center of it all, the empire I'd built molecule by molecule, and opened a document titled Asset Audit, Phase 2. Rowan entered without knocking. He carried 2 coffees and a folder marked confidential in thick black Sharpie. 1 soy, 1 black, he said, placing mine beside the leather blotter. And the inventory you requested. I took a sip, then opened the folder. Inside, a comprehensive list of every item of value, personal, professional, and psychological, that had passed through mine and Thomas's lives over the last 12 years, from the penthouse furniture to joint travel accounts, from our art acquisitions to shared subscriptions, digital footprints, copyrights, pending patents. Rowan glanced at me. You're sure you want to go this granular? I didn't look up. He wanted half. He'll understand what half means. The list was brutal in its precision. The Eames lounge chair he claimed as his reading spot, purchased with my Q3 bonus, receipt attached. The abstract oil painting above the fireplace, acquired at Art Basel, charged to my personal account. The Le Creuset cookware he gifted me on our 5th anniversary, bought with my corporate Amex, categorized as employee appreciation. I knew what I was doing, not because I was vengeful, but because I was thorough. Men like Thomas mistake elegance for weakness. They assume that restraint is a lack of resolve. Let him learn. I spent the next 6 hours in what could only be described as surgical focus. Every object, account, contract, and obligation tied to our shared life was dissected, documented, classified. Green for undisputed, yellow for negotiable, red for strategically withheld. The penthouse posed the biggest legal challenge. Technically joint ownership, but I'd paid every mortgage installment. Even the down payment had come from my premarital assets. May's team was drafting a retroactive contribution statement supported by financial forensic analysis. If Thomas wanted the apartment, he'd have to buy out his half, at full market value. And if he couldn't, which I knew he couldn't, he'd be forced to forfeit. Savannah's name surfaced once, in connection with a $6,400 payment made to her LLC from our joint consulting fund. The invoice described social media strategy consulting. No deliverables attached. Rowan hovered. Do we want to escalate that? I tapped the line with my pen. Flag it, but don't engage yet. Savannah wanted relevance. Legal action would hand her a stage. Not yet. In that evening, I met with May at a private boardroom inside her firm. She wore her usual black blazer and red lipstick, battle colors. We reviewed the compiled evidence and my proposed strategy for asset division. "I assume he'll contest," she said. "Of course. Then this becomes psychological." I nodded. "So we don't just take what's mine. We dismantle the illusion that he ever contributed." May smiled. "The court will love you. Let them love my records." At 9 p.m., I sat on the floor of the penthouse living room, surrounded by receipts, shipping labels, and valuation reports. The room was silent except for the occasional rustle of paper and the soft click of my pen. On the coffee table sat the photo Thomas once insisted we frame, a black and white portrait from our honeymoon in Sicily. We stood barefoot on a beach, wind-blown and drunk on sunlight, back when I thought loyalty meant compromise. I picked up the frame. Glass, metal, weighty, expensive. I turned it over, removed the backing, slid the photo out, then I slipped in the first page of a notarized motion to divide assets, tucked the frame neatly back into place. Some things deserve a proper burial. The following morning, I scheduled a valuation visit. A professional appraiser arrived, clipboard in hand, no-nonsense demeanor. She moved through the apartment, tagging items discreetly. The Scandinavian light fixtures, the Moroccan rug in the hallway, the mid-century buffet Thomas always insisted was his design choice. I followed her room to room, noting which objects Savannah had claimed as her aesthetic. The rose quartz centerpiece, the macrame wall hanging in the guest room, the essential oil diffusers scattered like breadcrumbs. I had them all packed, not removed, just boxed and labeled, non-essential decor, pending disposition. Let her see what scarcity smells like. And later, I reviewed the finalized inventory spreadsheet. It spanned 18 pages. The final line read, "Emotional labor, 12 years unpaid, non-compensable, legacy reabsorbed by original owner." I stared at it for a long time. Then I highlighted it in green. At midnight, I stood in the bedroom doorway and looked around. The space felt cleaner now, lighter. Every item had been touched, accounted for, reclaimed. The illusion of our life dismantled plank by plank. I poured a glass of red wine and stepped out onto the balcony. The city below shimmered, indifferent and eternal. My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. I saw the removal list. I didn't realize how much of it was yours. I stared at the message, then typed, "That's the point." I didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing left to clarify, only to execute. There's a particular kind of power in being underestimated, especially when you've cultivated it. In the weeks following the inventory sweep, I let the world believe I was dormant, silent, wounded, perhaps. The woman scorned, the CEO retreating into privacy. I wore that narrative like a designer trench coat, elegant, neutral, concealing the arsenal underneath. What they didn't see were the meetings behind closed doors, the flights under aliases, the offshore corporate restructuring executed through layers of shell entities and NDA-bound intermediaries. They didn't see the floor plan taped to my bedroom wall, labeled not with decor ideas, but asset migration paths. On a foggy Thursday morning, I boarded a plane to London. No fanfare, no press. Rowan handled my calendar with surgical ambiguity. Officially, I was attending a wellness symposium in Prague. In reality, I was walking into a private salon on Curzon Street, where a venture partner from my earliest Aurora days, Mark Lemoyne, waited with contracts thick enough to alter the future. He stood when I entered, all French angles and quiet money, his cufflinks catching the dim gold light. "Helena," he said, kissing my cheek. "You look..." He paused. "More dangerous than usual." I smiled without warmth. "I'm done being safe." The documents were straightforward. A partial sale of international licensing rights for Aurora's Asia-Pacific distribution, publicly framed as growth strategy, privately structured to redirect substantial liquidity into a newly formed holding company under my sole control. Mark raised a brow as he flipped through the clauses. "Thomas will never see this coming." "Good," I said. "He's not supposed to." I returned to New York with a briefcase full of signatures and a balance sheet that now had teeth. The funds would clear within a week, quietly nested in legal insulation so tight it would take a forensic accountant years to trace. I wasn't hiding the money. I was protecting it. From entitlement, from assumption. from Savannah's Pinterest vision boards of shared futures. The next move came in Tokyo. 4 days later, I landed under soft rain and disappeared into the glass corridors of a discreet wealth management firm that had quietly overseen the fortunes of Eastern dynasties for generations. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. When I left, the Aurora, Japan office had a new silent investor, one who bore a striking resemblance to me but operated under a corporate persona 2 levels removed from my legal name. By the time Savannah posted a story from my penthouse balcony, arms raised, eyes closed, captioned, "When you let go of what no longer serves you, the universe delivers," I was watching from a 5-star hotel suite with a glass of Yamazaki and a smile so sharp it could have drawn blood. And while I moved silently across continents, Thomas was unraveling domestically. May forwarded an email from his counsel, a flurry of confusion over recent financial discrepancies. Their team had expected leverage. They found shadows, frozen accounts, redirected royalties, deferred distributions. He wrote directly too. Of course he did. "We need to talk. I didn't realize how fast you'd move. This isn't fair." I didn't respond. He followed with another message, then a voicemail. "I just think we owe it to each other to stay civil. You don't have to do this." What he meant was, don't win like this. The one night, Rowan knocked softly on my office door. "I thought you should see this." He handed me a printed article from a second-tier gossip site, the kind that fed off influencer drama and CEO scandals with equal appetite. The headline read, "Savannah Ray, the face of feminine disruption or strategic mistress." The piece was venomous. A source close to the Aurora inner circle had leaked details of her alleged self-branding within my company. Comments referenced her speaking engagement faux pas, her ambiguous role in a company that never listed her name on any board or filing. One paragraph caught my eye. "Sources confirm Helena Morais has not made a single public statement since the split, leading some to speculate she's letting Savannah and Thomas destroy their credibility unchecked." "Exactly," Savannah responded, predictably, with a long Instagram caption about women tearing down other women and jealous ex-wives. She posted a photo of herself in lingerie on my staircase, looking over her shoulder like betrayal was a photo shoot. I screenshotted everything, then sent the images to May with a single note. "Ready Phase 3, Public Narrative Realignment." And by the end of the month I'd done the following. 1. Transferred all personally acquired assets into the Aurora Family Trust. 2. Initiated an audit on the boutique marketing firm Thomas started post-separation, now suspected of operating with investor funds I once introduced. 3. Quietly acquired a controlling interest in a startup wellness app Savannah had promoted, then terminated the collaboration citing brand misalignment. No headlines, no fireworks, just silence, laced with consequence. "Ma man," in the final quiet move came in Paris. I bought the apartment she once joked was too sterile and mature. 8th arrondissement, triple exposure, floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to views of the Seine. I furnished it with restraint. Walnut, stone, a single Rothko on loan from a gallery I backed anonymously. It would be my new base of operations once the divorce was final. A new chapter, written not in reaction to loss, but as the natural continuation of evolution. Let them chase relevance. I was building legacy. None that night, in the quiet hum of my Parisian flat, I poured a glass of white burgundy and stood by the window, watching the city unfold below. Somewhere, Savannah was staging another video. Thomas was rehearsing another apology. And I was already somewhere they couldn't follow. Not because I blocked the road, but because they never knew how to read the map. That the concept came to me on the flight from Paris to New York, somewhere over the Atlantic, where the night was so absolute, it felt like I was suspended in ink. I was reviewing Aurora's Q4 branding proposals, clean, polished, inoffensive, and I felt nothing. The ideas were safe, beautiful, sterile, just like the image Thomas had helped cultivate. Pristine femininity, with an edge of ethereal detachment. The untouchable wife, the gracious leader, the woman who never cracked, even when cut open. But I had cracked, and I was still here. Maybe that's what real beauty was, what real branding should be. Not perfection, but power reclaimed in the aftermath of collapse. So I called Rowan. "Cancel the campaign," I said, before he could finish his greeting. A pause. "Which one?" "All of it. We're starting over." 3 days later, I stood in Aurora's downtown creative studio in front of a wall plastered with raw, unretouched images. Women of every age, every shade, photographed mid-motion, mid-laughter, mid-tear. They weren't posed. They were present. The campaign name was simple: After. The tagline: we don't glow despite what we've been through. We glow because of it. I wanted to reclaim every insult Savannah and Thomas had lobbed like confetti. Aging, wrinkled, cold, corporate. The narrative of the hard woman whose success had made her unlovable. I wanted to set it on fire and watch women walk through the flames. We cast real clients. A trauma nurse in her 50s, a divorced dancer rebuilding her studio, a woman who survived breast cancer and now taught self-defense to teenage girls. No celebrities, no influencers, just women who had lived. One of the images showed a woman staring into the mirror, her face bare, her hand resting on a faint scar near her collarbone. Another showed a grandmother braiding her granddaughter's hair in morning light. Another, my favorite, captured a woman mid-run, mascara streaked from sweat and tears, smiling like she'd just won a private war. We didn't filter any of it. We printed the first teaser on a full-page spread in Vogue. Aurora, After, coming soon. Nothing else. No branding, no product shots. Just the word that would reframe the conversation. The internet lit up within hours. Turned at first, the speculation was clinical. Was After a new serum line? A post-treatment formula? Then came the discourse. Think pieces. Threads. Reaction videos. Women posted photos of themselves barefaced with captions like, "This is my after." Survivors of illness, heartbreak, job loss, motherhood, divorce. They turned the word into a badge of honor. And when the campaign finally dropped, a 3-minute video narrated by a woman with a voice like gravel and grace, nothing short of digital combustion followed. The final line echoed across the internet like a prayer. "You don't owe anyone your silence. Let them hear your after." Savannah responded the only way she knew how, by trying to co-opt it. 3 days after the launch, she posted a reel. Her walking barefoot through Central Park in a gauzy white dress, voiceover whispering about letting go of shame and stepping into the afterlife of your glow-up. The comments were divided. Some applauded her, others weren't so kind. "Girl, this is Helena's campaign. Sit down. Trying to steal her narrative now? This isn't your after. This is your audition." Aurora didn't respond. We didn't need to. Every major beauty editor had already requested interviews. Every luxury boutique doubled their standing orders. Brand sentiment soared. And Forbes ran a follow-up titled, "Helena Morais isn't rebranding. She's reclaiming." Thomas emailed me that night. Subject: "We need to talk." Body: "I saw the campaign. It's powerful. You're powerful. I just hope there's still a version of this where we can be human with each other." I deleted it, then forwarded it to May with the subject line, "Maintain firewall." In the next board meeting was quiet at first. Then Rochelle, my CFO, said what everyone had been circling. "You understand this isn't just a campaign, right? This is a movement." I nodded. "Exactly. You're becoming the face of it." I met her gaze. "Then I'll wear it well." That weekend, I hosted a private dinner at the penthouse, my penthouse, now legally secured and purged of ghost energy. 12 women. No press, no phones, just candles, food, music, and the kind of conversation that rearranges your spine. We talked about afters, the ones we chose, the ones forced upon us, the ones we're still writing. At one point, someone raised a glass. "To Helena," she said, "for showing us what rage, when refined, can create." I smiled, not because it was true, but because I knew it wasn't rage that built this. It was clarity, precision, patience, and the understanding that the most dangerous woman in the room is the one who no longer needs to be liked. But every betrayal leaves a breadcrumb trail. Some come in the form of credit card receipts and metadata. Others are found in the cadence of a lie told too effortlessly, in the way a name slips from someone's mouth as if it's been practiced in front of a mirror. I wasn't just documenting a divorce. I was building a case, not for a judge, not for the public, for myself, to make sense of how the life I built with surgical precision had become a stage set for someone else's performance. So I built a dossier, not out of vengeance, but because I wanted the truth. And I've always trusted paper more than promises. The file sat on the corner of my desk in a matte black binder labeled simply S+T. Inside, neatly divided by tabs, were sections titled Financial Activity, Digital Footprint, Associates, Statements, and finally, Narrative Manipulation. It began with numbers. Thomas had claimed he had no knowledge of Savannah's business expenses being paid through joint accounts, but the Audit May Commission told a different story. There were regular transfers from our discretionary account to her LLC every month for over a year, amounts just under the reporting threshold that would trigger alerts. Quiet money, clean exits. I had copies of every invoice, some handwritten on notepads bearing the logo of my company, others absurdly vague. Emotional clarity consulting, alignment sessions, creative supervision. Savannah had also formed 2 shell companies since moving in, both registered under Delaware holding entities, both listing her as creative director. The catch? One of them mirrored the brand identity of Aurora almost exactly. Same font family, same muted pastel palette, a fragrance line coming soon, promising sacred healing from the inside out. They weren't even pretending to innovate. They were copying, recycling, diluting. Ana sostant. On a Wednesday morning, I summoned Thomas to a meeting. Not at the office, not in public, at the penthouse. I wanted the setting to feel familiar. He arrived 15 minutes late, dressed in a blazer too tight for his midsection and cologne. I hadn't smelled since year 3 of our marriage. He looked around as if expecting to be ambushed. Relax, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me at the dining table. This isn't a trap. It's a conversation. He sat, fidgeted, cleared his throat. You look good. I know. A beat passed. Why now? He asked. Why the campaign, the silence, the intensity? I slid the black dossier across the table to him. He opened it. At first, slowly, then faster. His eyes scanned the documents, the screenshots, the timelines. His shoulders stiffened. He stopped on a page marked in red. The page showed an internal email he'd sent to one of Savannah's brand consultants. Subject line, Building her empire from the ashes of Aurora. He looked up, his face pale. Where did you get this? Don't insult us both by pretending it's not yours. He closed the folder. What do you want? I want nothing, I said calmly. That's the difference between us. I don't want revenge. I want clarity. And I want you to understand exactly how much I know. He exhaled, rubbing his jaw. I made mistakes. You made decisions, I corrected. He tried a softer tone. We were broken long before she came along. You never had time. Always in meetings. Always building. I needed someone who made space for me. Savannah makes space for you because she's living in mine. He looked down. I stood. I'm not here to punish you, Thomas. That's not necessary. The world will take care of that. I'm just here to tell you that, from this point forward, you don't own the narrative. I do. The next morning, I finalized the termination of all co-owned properties, assets, and investments. The penthouse was mine outright. The vacation home in the Berkshires, his favorite weekend retreat, was sold without fanfare. The proceeds were rerouted to a scholarship fund under my mother's name. Savannah posted a vague message the next day. Sometimes blessings come disguised as endings. One comment under it made me pause. Editorial Insider. Interesting? Heard you're being removed from your own brand collab. That wasn't me. That was the market catching up. That Friday, I met May for lunch at a private club where the tables were wide and the silence polite. She wore her usual black, but today, she had something extra in her tone, a glint of satisfaction just behind the composure. Have you seen this? She asked, sliding her phone across the table. It was a leaked email thread, one of Savannah's PR reps trying to book her on a podcast circuit. The rejection emails were blunt. Not until the Aurora situation is clarified. Our audience values originality. Too much overlap with Helena's campaign. Brand confusion risk. Brand confusion. That was the term Thomas once used when I wore navy instead of Aurora's signature blush at a company gala. He said it disrupted the visual harmony. I smiled at the irony. That evening, I pulled out the diamond earrings Thomas gave me on our 10th anniversary. Brilliant cut. Platinum setting. At the time, I thought they were a love gift. Now I knew they were consolation for a year of emotional distance and growing resentment. I wore them anyway. Not because they reminded me of him, but because they were exquisite. Sometimes you reclaim things not by erasing the history, but by rewriting their purpose. I stood in front of the mirror, earrings catching the light, hair swept back, suit tailored to perfection. It wasn't an event night. It wasn't a media appearance. It was just me, in my space, on my terms. A woman who had gathered every piece of the empire that someone else tried to steal, and found she was worth more without them. Benain Enderiam. There's something poetic about returning to the scene of your humiliation as its guest of honor. 6 months had passed since the Aurora Winter Gala. The night Savannah first appeared at my side like a glitch in the Matrix, all shimmer and entitlement. Thomas smirking beside her like a man who believed he'd won something. Now, the Winter Gala was back. Same venue, same chandeliers. But this time, the invitation didn't come from my assistant or the board. It came directly from the chair of the Women in Innovation Council, with a handwritten note. We'd be honored to celebrate not just your resilience, but your redesign of power itself. They were giving me the Legacy Award. It wasn't just an industry nod. It was a cultural signal, a repositioning, a reckoning. The woman once quietly mocked behind menus and makeup tutorials was now being honored for changing how women rebuilt. And they weren't doing it in a private room. They were doing it on the main stage. I accepted, but I changed the dress code. Black tie? Yes, but with a note at the bottom of the invitation. No apologies allowed. At the day of the gala, the city was wrapped in snow. Not the harsh kind that clogs sidewalks and ruins blowouts, but the cinematic kind. Light flurries that made even cynics glance up from their phones. My driver pulled up in front of the Metropolitan Club at 7:26 p.m. I stepped out wearing a custom Balenciaga gown. Deep sapphire, high neckline, backless. No jewelry save for the diamond earrings I'd reclaimed. My hair was slicked into a low knot. My heels were silent on the marble. I didn't need volume. The room turned when I entered. Not because I demanded it, because I'd earned it. Inside, everything was curated to reflect transformation. Floral installations built from repurposed industrial parts. Music that fused classical strings with modern bass lines. Even the centerpieces carried embedded QR codes linking to stories of women who had rebuilt after public collapse. I didn't see Savannah at first. I didn't expect to, until I did. She was near the media wall, wrapped in ivory sequins, holding court with a trio of junior influencers and a lifestyle coach who sold online courses in magnetic femininity. Her smile faltered when she saw me, but she didn't turn away. Thomas wasn't with her. Interesting. I offered her a nod, neither cold nor warm, the kind you give to someone who once played a role in your story, but no longer affects the ending. She nodded back, just once, then looked away. Backstage, as I waited for my cue, Rowan appeared with a glass of water and a quick briefing. They added 2 minutes to your slot. The chair said the room needed more of you. I smiled. It's not me they need. It's the version of themselves I remind them they can become. He grinned, still the cleanest killer in the room. Then the lights shifted. My name echoed across the chamber. Applause rose, and I walked. And to be Yan, my speech was short, but sharp. I spoke not of betrayal, not of branding, but of re-entry. I used to think that survival was the goal, that if I could just outlast the storm, I'd be fine. But storms aren't meant to be waited out. They're meant to be walked through. And when you do, you don't come out softer. You come out clear. I looked directly at the front row, where CEOs and editors sat shoulder to shoulder with women who'd once whispered about my collapse. I stand here not because I healed in private, but because I rebuilt in public, and I let them watch. The applause was real, not polite, not performative, real. Sat inside. After the gala, I lingered by the bar as guests filtered out, thanking me, asking for interviews, slipping business cards with trembling hands. Savannah approached quietly. Her expression was tight, not jealous, confused. I didn't know they were giving you the Legacy Award, she said. Congrats. I nodded. Thank you. She hesitated. I guess I didn't expect all this. This was never about expectations, I said. It was about execution. A pause. Then I added, you'll learn that, eventually, if you last. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. At 2:14 a.m., I returned to the penthouse, slipped out of the gown, stood barefoot on the balcony, snow swirling around me, skin alive. My phone buzzed once on the counter. A message from someone unexpected. Mark Lemoyne. The Paris property looks stunning. Ready to discuss the global expansion? I replied with 3 words. Let's begin. Finally. Truth, in its raw form, is inert. Useless. It doesn't roar. It doesn't strike. It just exists, waiting. It's only when you shape it, refine it, frame it with timing and intention, that it becomes a weapon. And by the time Thomas realized that, I was already pointing the barrel. It started with a leak, not to the tabloids. That would have been predictable. No, I had something cleaner in mind, more surgical. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, Corinne Vega, senior investigative writer at Business Maven, a woman who'd spent the better part of her career exposing exploitative brand structures, performative feminism in corporate boards, and the underbelly of influencer culture. She didn't chase headlines. She built narratives with the precision of a litigator. We met at a private table at Bemelman's. No phones, no recordings. "I'm not here to give you a scandal," I said. "I'm here to give you a mirror, if you're willing to hold it up." She leaned in. "What am I looking at?" I slid a leather envelope across the table. Inside, unredacted documents, correspondence, timeline logs, and a curated dossier that mapped not just the financial deceit Thomas had woven, but how Savannah attempted to spin proximity into ownership. The faux co-founder titles, the unauthorized brand usage, the ghost-written op-eds sent to digital magazines under her name. Corinne opened the file, skimmed a few pages, and sat back slowly. "This is coordinated." "No," I corrected. "This is accounted for." "There's a difference." She smiled faintly. "When do you want it to drop?" "Soon, but not until after the investor conference." Her brow lifted. "Because they're speaking on a panel?" "Yes. Let them stand beneath the spotlight before I cut the cord." And the Investor Impact Conference was the place where image collided with capital. Reputation didn't just matter. It dictated valuation. The panel was titled, "The Future is Female, Branding Beyond the Glass Ceiling." Thomas and Savannah were listed as speakers. I wasn't. I didn't need to be. I had the schedule memorized. At 11:40 a.m., they took the stage, he in a pale gray suit trying to look younger, she in powder blue with carefully tousled hair and eyes wide for the cameras. They spoke in practiced turns, phrases like authentic brand story, elevating feminine energy, post-patriarchal leadership rolled off their tongues like they'd rehearsed them in front of ring lights. Savannah even quoted Virginia Woolf, badly. At 11:58, Corinne's article dropped. Manufactured femininity, the branding of a false founder. It was a masterpiece, clear, calm, methodical. It didn't accuse. It revealed. It laid out a timeline of Savannah's calculated positioning, her attempt to insert herself into Aurora's origin story, and the clear discrepancy between her public claims and legal records. It cited sources. It referenced interviews. It embedded links to SEC filings. Every word was a scalpel. Within 20 minutes, the hashtag #OrNotYourFounder was trending. By 12:30, the panel was quietly pulled from the conference's official livestream archive. By 2, Savannah had locked her comment sections. By 4, Thomas released a statement through his PR team claiming miscommunication and intentional misinterpretation by third parties. No one believed it. That night, I returned to my office, poured a glass of Saint-Emilion, and watched the aftermath unfold in real time. Aurora's stock spiked by 6% on the back of regained investor confidence. Editorials praised the company for distancing itself from performative feminism hijacks. Commentators who had once speculated about my absence were now dissecting my silence as strategy. But what struck me most was the flood of private messages from women I'd never met. Executives, artists, entrepreneurs. "Thank you for not letting her rewrite your work. You just gave us a new playbook. I've been erased before. Watching you take it back healed something in me. That last one stayed with me. Because that's what this was about. Not optics, not revenge, restoration." At 10 p.m., Savannah called. I didn't pick up. She tried again at 10:17. Then a text. "You didn't have to destroy me." I stared at the screen, thought about every room she entered as if it were hers. Every time she used my words, wore my clothes, walked my floors as if they were a costume. I replied with 2 words, "Didn't have to." And at midnight, I walked into my closet, slid open the velvet-lined drawer that held the last physical thing Thomas had ever given me, a diamond cuff, engraved with the words, "For building the dream with me." I held it in my palm for a moment, then placed it in a small black box. Tomorrow, it would be auctioned. The proceeds would go to fund a women-led incubator I was launching under Aurora's new After division. The first project? A grant for creators rebuilding their identities after high-profile takedowns. Let them say what they wanted. Let them spin. I didn't need to tell the truth anymore. I had shown it. And once truth moves, it never goes back in the box. Dayan, There's a particular kind of silence that lingers long after you leave a room. It doesn't shout. It doesn't slam doors. It simply echoes. Not because you were loud, but because everything you didn't say leaves them desperate to fill the void. That's how you haunt a man like Thomas. Not with rage, with absence. Santantana. In the weeks following the exposé, Thomas vanished from public view. No statements, no appearances. The social media accounts once curated with corporate polished enthusiasm went dormant. His name was scrubbed from 2 advisory boards. The boutique marketing firm he'd launched quietly removed Savannah from their list of collaborators. One of their clients, a wellness brand I'd once introduced to him, released a statement thanking him for initial guidance, and nothing else. Savannah, on the other hand, tried to pivot. Hard. She rebranded overnight. A stripped-down aesthetic, neutral tones, captions about holding space and owning the mess. Gone were the soft-focused selfies and champagne-soaked affirmations. In their place were moody, black and white stills of her journaling by candlelight and vague confessions about being misunderstood. But the algorithm has a memory. So do people. You can't borrow a woman's crown, shatter it in public, and expect the throne to remain yours. I hadn't spoken to Thomas in over a month. I didn't need to. But one night I walked into the penthouse and found something unexpected. A package. No note. No sender. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook. My handwriting, my sketches, the original Aurora concept notes. I hadn't seen it since year 2 of our marriage, when I thought I'd lost it in Paris. He'd kept it, or stolen it. Either way, it had returned to me. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was a watch I once gave him. Brushed titanium, custom engraved. He used to wear it to meetings when he wanted to feel impenetrable. I stared at it, then slid both the notebook and the watch into my office safe. Artifacts. Nothing more. The gala buzz had faded, but the ripples hadn't. I'd become something I hadn't planned. A figure. Not just a founder or survivor, but a blueprint. Women were citing Aurora in business panels and feminist essays. Podcasts broke down my silence as strategy. Helena Morais was no longer just a name. It was a lesson. And Thomas was a warning. Nasnai, but haunting isn't just about what you withhold. It's about when you appear. So when the Spring Philanthropy Ball released its guest list, and I saw his name, alone, no +1, I didn't cancel my RSVP. I confirmed it, and selected a dress unlike anything I'd ever worn. Dark emerald, velvet, sculpted to the edge of indecency without crossing into spectacle, paired with a choker that once belonged to a 19th century duchess and a pair of heels that could crush egos. I didn't go to be seen. I went to be remembered. He saw me before I saw him. I felt it. That shift in atmosphere. The sudden hush. The flicker of eyes darting between us like nervous couriers of unspoken truth. When I finally turned, he stood across the ballroom in a black tux, drink in hand, posture stiff. He looked older. Not just tired. Unmoored. He took a step forward, then stopped. Good. He was learning. Later, as I slipped away to the terrace, I heard footsteps behind me. Familiar. Hesitant. I didn't turn. He spoke anyway. You've changed. No, I said softly. You just didn't stay long enough to see it happen. He exhaled. I think about what I ruined. You didn't ruin anything, I replied. You just removed yourself from the story. The plot moved on. Another silence. Then he asked the question all ghosts eventually whisper. Do you ever miss it? Us? I turned. Met his eyes. No anger. No ache. Thomas, I said, you can't miss something that never actually existed the way you thought it did. He looked at me like a man realizing the door had always been locked. From my side, I left him on the terrace, surrounded by everything he thought he'd taken with him, and I didn't look back. That night, I returned home and poured a glass of syrah, opened the balcony doors, sat barefoot in silence. No victory lap, no revenge anthem, just stillness, and somewhere across the city, I knew he was staring at his phone, waiting for a message that would never come. The truth is, the sharpest form of power isn't rage. It's restraint. It's never saying the words they expect. It's living so well they wonder if they ever mattered. And they say to never forget where you came from, but they rarely mention you must also erase where you weren't invited to stay. Savannah, for all her crafted proximity, had never really been in my life, not in the way that matters. She was a guest, a placeholder, a photograph in someone else's memory book. She wore me like a mask, but she never inhabited the skin. Still, there were moments when the illusion held too tightly, a light switch left on in the hallway, a half-finished notebook on the kitchen counter, a scarf draped on a chair that smelled faintly like me, so I reclaimed them, piece by piece. The 2 weeks after the gala, I notified the building management of the penthouse that effective immediately, all access keys, fobs, and elevator privileges must be restricted to my name alone. No exceptions. The building's board, long accustomed to my presence in the shadows of Thomas's name, blinked at the clarity of the instruction. They complied. The day the new security system went live, I watched the screens in my private surveillance room, the lobby doors, the elevator banks, each corridor. Day passes flickered, then expired. Guest clearance revoked. Common areas renamed. The world inside those walls would know, not gradually, but unequivocally, that only one name truly belonged there. Savannah tried to show up that evening, clutching her phone like an umbrella in a rainstorm. She rang the buzzer, insisting it was urgent, but the system denied her. She buzzed again, and again. I watched it all live. The red, access denied, flashing on the screen she no doubt stared into for minutes before retreating. I admit, I smiled, because the door she tried to walk through had never been hers. Then inside, I reorganized the space. I purged sentimental clutter, tickets to shows, framed Polaroids, half-emptied candles. These were relics of a life I no longer owed anyone. I replaced them with archival prints, abstract work from artists I backed anonymously during my first years, a sculpture of copper and void, a single massive mirror I mounted flush on the living room wall, reflection as territory. Then I rekeyed my private drawer, the one that held my original vision journals, future plans, and only just formed dreams, the one Savannah once rifled through thinking she might inherit. That drawer became my sanctuary. I added a plaque to the entrance foyer, unmarked, brushed chrome, with only one word, home, no name, no apology, just occupancy. If she tried to make it hers, she'd be denied. Savannah posted a video that night, a montage of her walking across city streets, voiceover describing a love that felt like home, and a door left open for us both. The comments swelled with sympathy, but those who remembered the exposé saw through it. The same woman was calling in the name of belonging she never legally held. One viewer wrote, "Your name was never on the title. The truth is sharp. It cuts at the invisible threads of entitlement." She changed captions, tried to reframe, but the headlines had already moved on. I held a small gathering that weekend, just a few women I trusted, colleagues, clients, confidants. I see now that the rebuilding one does in private matters more than what one shows in public. I poured elderflower tea, served light bites. No spectacle. One guest lingered in the kitchen as others drifted away. "Did you always plan to take the apartment fully?" she asked quietly, tracing the edges of the reclaimed walls. "Yes," I admitted, but not with anger, with clarity, confidence. The person who doesn't deserve your reins doesn't deserve to hold your crown. She nodded, thoughtful. Sometimes the hardest part isn't winning. It's giving yourself full permission not to fight for space you outgrew. On that night, I sat on the balcony, legs draped over the marble ledge, listening to the city hush under starlight. A sense of peace settled, one born not of triumph, but of resolve. A message lit on my phone. May, closing documents sent, final settlement ready for signature Thursday. You're close. I exhaled, forwarded her address to the trustee, then pulled up my floor plan on the smart system. There it was, the full draft of After House, an initiative I'd quietly seeded months earlier. Purpose: to support women in creative, emotional, financial reconstruction after public upheaval. The headquarters would be in this very penthouse, offices in one wing, gallery retreat in another, private suites for residencies. The apartment wouldn't just be a home, it would be a launching point. Tomorrow, when the divorce decree was signed and final, I would walk into a new life that bore my name fully. The name Helena Morais would no longer share thresholds or shadows. I would never have to haunt him again, because I would now haunt possibility, and that, in its own way, is more potent than vengeance. But the dawn of reinvention comes quietly. The morning the decree arrived, I awoke to filtered sunlight sliding across the marble floors. I sat up in silk sheets and felt the weight of possibility waking beside me. No shared bank alerts, no legal notices, no social media pings from old friends or false sympathizers. Just the slow pulse of a world we built, now entirely within my hands. I walked through the apartment as though greeting a new city. The foyer, the living room, the gallery wall I installed months ago showcasing raw women's portraits from the After campaign, the kitchen where I would host future dinners for rising creators, the balcony where I'd paused amid snow to remember what survival felt like. The penthouse was mine, not just in title but in atmosphere, in intention. I dressed in a crisp cream suit, no jewelry, just confidence. I stepped into my office with calm resolve. My executive team gathered for an impromptu morning meeting. There was tension, the unspoken question. Now what? I spoke plainly. Aurora doesn't rebuild on reaction. We reimagine. Today we begin the next chapter. No setbacks, no distractions. Elevated strategy, expanded vision. Their eyes were steady, hopeful, respectful. Internally, I had already begun executing the plan. First, launch After Labs, the incubator for women-led innovation in wellness and reinvention. I allocated a portion of the settlement funds and redirected a portion of Aurora's R&D budget into seed grants for entrepreneurs affected by reputational collapse, career sabotage, or public betrayal. Second, reposition global operations. The Paris apartment became Aurora's European hub. Tokyo played host to After Asia. From there, I quietly acquired minority stakes in niche biotech startups focusing on skin microbiome wellness, wearable wellness devices, and holistic sleep science. Third, reputation restoration. I granted Corinne Vega an exclusive long-form feature in Business Maven titled Unbroken: The Architecture of Comeback. In it, I narrated not betrayal, but evolution. The story led with the After campaign, wove through the exposé, and concluded with the global expansion, turned narrative of reinvention. I didn't address Savannah or Thomas by name. I didn't have to. The piece went live at 9 p.m. local time across London, New York, Paris. Mentions peaked on social media, investor press, wellness forums. I watched the data, click-throughs, shares, comments like, "This is the blueprint I wish I had." She rose not from spite, but design. Who needs a hero when you can build your own horizon? When that night, I hosted a launch gala, not in New York, but in Paris, on the rooftop terrace of the apartment. Aurora's key partners, clients, and media people gathered beneath the Senli skyline. Glasses clinked. Artists performed live readings from campaign subjects. The air was scented with jasmine and possibility. I stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you," I began simply. Not for celebrating my past, or my pain, but for believing in every woman who's ever needed space to reconstruct herself. Aurora is no longer just skincare. We are reclamation. We are After in action. We rise not in spite of what we've been through, but because we honored it. The applause was full, not polite. It was generative. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Rowan approached me. "They're calling it the comeback of the decade," he said quietly. I nodded, turning to gaze at Paris. The city felt familiar and new. "I don't want comebacks," I said. "I want continuums." And later, I retreated to the small terrace library I'd installed, floor-to-ceiling glass, books about stoicism, modern feminism, design, branding, economics. I opened my phone. Thomas had sent another message. "Congratulations." It wasn't bitter, just clean. It weighed lighter than his previous manipulations. I replied, "Thank you. I'm building more than success. I'm building significance." I put the phone aside. The lights in the city mirrored the stars above. The skyline sparkled. I held my glass of champagne, remembering the one I sent to the empty apartment, engraved. I realized something then. I didn't just take back what was mine. I elevated what could be mine, and what could be ours. The future wasn't a place to escape from the past. It was a place where the past becomes the foundation. They say perspective comes with distance. I discovered it mid-flight, somewhere between continents, when the world below looked like a patchwork quilt of possibility, not a cage I'd escaped, but a territory I now commanded. I boarded the Aurora private jet just before dawn. The cabin was hushed, the soft hum of engines warming. My carry-on held nothing but essentials: a laptop with final drafts of the Afterhouse charter, one silk dress, the security drives, and a single champagne flute engraved with the name Helena Morais. I placed the flute in the center console, as if to remind myself who I was now, and who they thought they'd replaced. The runway stretched before me. I watched the registration lights of the terminal fade behind and felt a long, deep inhalation, a breath I'd been holding for too long. As the engines roared and we lifted into the sky, the cityscape shrank until it was a soft smear of illumination beneath clouds. From 30,000 feet, I could see how small the battleground had seemed, how tiny were the perceived betrayals, how vast, then, the territory of reinvention. And I understood. Victory was never a loud battle cry. It was the quiet shift of altitude, the reframing of gravity so that the weight no longer pinned you down. How? The first call I made was to Mei Lin. "Settlement is final," I said when she answered. "Transfer the final tranche into the aftertrust. Execute the incipient partnerships, and send notices to the board confirming that the forthcoming expansions carry my sole signature." There was a pause. Then May's voice. "Congratulations, Helena. You are far beyond this now." I smiled. "I'm just beginning." Chaudhry. As the flight found its cruise altitude, I settled into the executive seat and opened my laptop. I read part of the after-house draft, the manifesto, the program outlines, the grant criteria, the residency rules, the architecture. I watched the outline stretch across the screen and realized this was never about proving him wrong. This was about proving me right. I paused at one line. "We rise, not by outrunning the past, but by building something irrevocably new atop it. Irrevocable, permanent, non-negotiable. That would be my legacy." None below, the world blurred into continents and oceans. Above, quiet cabin light. An attendant offered me tea. I declined. Silence tasted better. Peace tasted better. My phone buzzed once, with passive alerts. Press mentions, brand milestones, investor confirmations. I didn't open them. They were echoes of the structure I was erecting. I didn't need affirmation from them. I needed vision from me. In that moment, I allowed something I hadn't in months. Stillness. No battle. No strategy. Just being. Let the wind hold me. The horizon tether me. The plane carry me forward. When the first light of dawn broke over the next coast, I saw land appear. Mountain ridges, coastline, a city waking. That was where I'd be, in a place that had never claimed me, where I would build not because I had something to prove, but because I had everything to reimagine. Later that day, the world would read headlines. Helena Morais launches after house headquarters in Singapore. Aurora APAC office opens. Lead by founder. Unburdened by scandal. Former husband's PR firm declares bankruptcy amid fallout. But up here, above everything, none of that mattered. What mattered was the quiet shift in trajectory, the change in gravity, the perspective earned at 30,000 feet. I poured a small measure of champagne into the flute I'd placed earlier. The golden liquid caught the cabin light. I lifted it to the horizon and whispered, "To new heights, to unclaimed spaces, to the maps we draw when no one else sees them." I sipped. The moment was delicate, fragile, eternal. Beneath me the world waited. Ahead, infinite sky. And inside, I felt irreversibly anchored to possibility. Tea. When the plane descended toward Singapore, I looked out at the skyline. Tall buildings, lights, promise. A city unburdened by my past. Within a week, I would sign the final lease for Afterhouse. The press would gather. The world would see, again, that I did not just endure betrayal. I redirected its energy. Thomas and Savannah would be footnotes in op-eds about downfall. Their names would fade into cautionary tales. My name would remain, not just as founder of Aurora, but as architect of rebirth. In the months that followed, Aurora's revenue soared. After Labs funded dozens of projects, women I'd never met sent letters, photos, dreams, and trust. I built more than a brand reborn. I built a movement. At night, in my Singapore apartment, I'd stand by the window overlooking the Marina Bay skyline, sip tea, and feel something I hadn't known in years. Calm resolve. I wasn't just untouchable, I was uncontainable. And the view from 30,000 feet wasn't a departure from my story. It was the elevation of it.